All right, I'd like to officially welcome you to the Art of Visual Inquiry, Increasing Understanding with Connections. My name is Shelley Hayduck, and I'm co-hosting today's event with Matt Caton, our Director of Customer Solutions.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today's a really great webinar to attend just because of the variety of different brains and styles and subjects that we'll be sharing with you today. So we're looking forward to it. It's going to be a great webinar.
Yeah, I have a potpourri of examples. So as I mentioned earlier, for some of you who logged on a little bit earlier in the session, if you see an example in my tabs that you want me to pull up, I will. I really want to load you up with examples and kind of inspire you to build your own knowledge base. The title of this webinar, The Art of Visual Inquiry, is all about formulating a question, or we're all struggling with things in our businesses, in our personal lives, or just in terms of general knowledge and insight. And the thing is, there's so much information. We can get that information from the news, from the web, from our file drives, but having a place where you can bring it all together and really form that inquiry in a way that answers will arise based on the connections and the gestalt of all your information that you're putting together. So we're going to cover different brains. I know there's a lot of educational students, teachers, researchers on our call today, and I know some of you are doing distance learning, some of you are back in your offices and classrooms and so forth. So we'll also cover how to use the brain as a study guide and to enrich your view on a complex subject matter very easily. So I'm going to start off with my writer's brain. The top half of the screen in the brain is the visual interface. So that's what's used to sort of traverse across a wide variety of topics. And this is where you're going to start to create your categorization structure that becomes your foundation for building your knowledge. And it starts off in a way in a little more of a hierarchy, and then it becomes more connected. So in this particular brain, I am a writer, and this is sort of a real meets a little bit of creative liberty brain for purpose of example. So you can get a sense of, how somebody who is a writer, who is a researcher, who is a student could utilize the brain. Clicking on any piece of information in the brain triggers all related pieces of information. So I'm constantly presented with my most relevant information. So I've just gone into my writing project. So that's the other thing that's great about the brain. We're not just using the brain to sort of organize information and leave it as an archive. This is a very active project where I've got my story. If I want to come in here and take a note about today, I think we need to cover new product features or whatever I'm writing about. I can come in here and take my note and capture my ideas as well, because part of building that knowledge base is not only getting the information in that's out there on your computer and in the internet, but it's getting stuff out of your head into a trusted place where you can go ahead, and then I realize that story development note that's connected to what I'm going to do for corporate brochures, and I can go ahead and actually get started on building a document by adding a Word document or a note or a URL as well. So I can actually come in here and immediately attach information. So in this case, I'll just go ahead and attach a new Microsoft Word document, and I can just go ahead and get started on that. But maybe I'm having writer's block, and I actually, don't know. I'm just going to go ahead and close this. What to create. So I can go into this brain, and I actually have a knowledge base on stuff that is relevant to me. So some of the things that I do as a writer, of course, is I do internet and advertising writing. So I've got some links to different blog posts, and if I click on these links, They're actually attached as web pages. And I've got my brain sort of split screen. I like bottom, top. I can actually come over to these little arrows on the side and turn it, which is the default setting, by the way, so that these web pages appear on the side. So the brain, this is where you can kind of see how it becomes your study guide. So as I'm traversing through different content that might be attached to my thoughts, I can go ahead and see what's happening. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Edgar Allan Poe in this brain. And maybe I want to learn a little bit more about this particular genre of writing. I actually love the Wikipedia. I love adding information in my brain. One of the great things about the brain is I can continue to sort of map and index and recontextualize a web source. So for instance, I could obviously just do a search on Edgar Allan Poe. And some of you who are maybe a little bit cynical might ask, well, art of visual inquiry. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my search box and Google things. And that's great. And in fact, we do leverage Google. We're not saying you're not going to search the web. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into options and use my search web feature as well and hit search. Now, this is just the start of this is what I consider an inquiry, a search inquiry, but to make it the art of a visual inquiry, what you really need to do is add information and make connections. And these connections are really the hallmark of understanding, of assimilating that knowledge into your worldview and into forming conclusions. So I can go ahead and who was Edgar Allan Poe? This is very interesting. It's a little bit more about his biography rather than his work. So I'm going to come over here. And now that I've got this URL that's kind of interesting and makes sense to add into my knowledge base, I can simply drag and drop this right under Edgar Allan Poe. And that makes a new thought. And now what you can see, who is Edgar Allan Poe? It actually takes the name of that web page, and I've got this right here connected to everything else. So that works pretty nice. And if I want to go ahead and connect it to another author, or maybe this, who is Edgar Allan Poe? He's a little bit mysterious, not unlike Franz Kafka as well. So I can kind of go ahead and maybe I also want to do a biography for Franz Kafka. So I'm going to go ahead and do a web search and just get more information in. I'm just deliberately doing a lot of these web searches so I can show you how, once you're online, you can grab that information. You can do it on your phone, and Matt will show you how to do that through the Brain box a little later on in the session. I didn't realize Franz Kafka was on the IMDb. That's interesting. Let me go ahead and get this article on the essence of Kafka-esque, which sounds kind of interesting. So again, I'm just building my knowledge base. I'm just going to reposition this so you can see. So all I'm doing is I'm dragging and dropping. And that's the way that comes together. Now, in terms of looking at other pieces of content, what you can do is break down methodologies. And this is where it gets very interesting to use the brain as a teaching tool. And I'm just going to flip back to put the brain on top now, because I'm going to make the plex, the top half of the visual screen, a little bit more relevant here. Now, everything that surrounds the brain has a place for it. So anything above my active thought is a parent. So elements of story is under right veins, and anything below is a child thought. So I have some subcategories as to kind of what makes a good story. So we've got conflict, climax, characters, symbolism, the heroic journey, and then we have siblings, thoughts that share the same parent, as well as a jump thought. And so we've got a really great theorist, Joseph Campbell, who has inspired all kinds of movie scripts and stories. He's pioneered symbolism and the heroic journey. So I've got him connected right at the top to elements of story. And now what I'm going to do is drill down, and I'm going to click on the heroic journey. And under that, I actually have links to people who I feel have illustrated that in their writing. So, of course, I've got George Lucas, as well as Christopher Vogler, who's written a lot of Disney and has their own consulting. And that's related to Star Wars, which then, I can, obviously have all kinds of stuff. And that's I've got it classified under a certain type of conflict. And from there, I can get into other types of movies, and maybe this is human against government, and this goes back to conflict. And now what you can see is my past thought list also helps me backtrack. So if I want to go back to the heroic journey and actually go ahead and look at the outline that takes to make a story, I've actually got these thoughts. And this is getting back to some of the students and teachers that are on the session today, where here we go. And this is sort of, usually you'll have a lot of diagrams, and as a writer, or I'll even show you how this is done for drug discovery with vaccines that are in phases for COVID-19. But you have phases, you have methodologies. But the great thing about the brain is you can visualize these phases and methodologies and actually add information at each part. So again, not to get too much into storytelling and writing. And for those of you who want this brain, this is an example. I'm happy to share it with you. But there's a call to action that the hero takes all the way from going into the ordinary world to, crossing the threshold and sometimes changing him or herself. So anyway, so each of these things are phases. And if I'm writing a story, I might want to think about, break it down in these terms. And I've got in these different sort of marks of a good, fantasy story that you might be writing, different areas where I'm researching. So for instance, there's a story about key characters that I have doing some work on some mentors in this story. So I have it under meeting with mentors, but that's also related to a character that I might be inspired from another novel, which was written by Leo Tolstoy. So, and that's under heroines. So you can see how this area is kind of fun. You can have fun with it, where I've just done a little area where you can attach zoomable icons and build an area to be inspired to learn. So that's just kind of one example. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go into the teaching and learning brain, and a more broader example. That was more focused on specifically writing, my writing methodology, my writing projects. But this is more, now I'm going to go into a study guide that has a little bit more broader reach. And when I say study guide, I want you guys to realize that for those of you that are in a business, this can be your product roadmap, okay? This can be your competitive research. We have examples on stuff like that we can, get into if you want to. So the sky's the limit as to the kind of brain that you can create, and there's actually no limit to the number of topics or connections that you can make. So in this particular example, I've got, this is designed for a teacher where, you might have your learning curriculum of what you want. Like you could even have something like, I have a poetry kit for Shel Silverstein, who I love. And this is something that, I'm working on with, pre-K for my daughter. So, as a parent, you can do stuff like this, and you can have a section for lesson plans. And this is now depending on what you're studying. Maybe you are getting your postdoc, or you're actually a researcher, a medical researcher, and we actually have Joint Council of Cardiothoracic Surgery who uses the brain to actually train their up-and-coming surgeries, and that's actually a really great example as well. But I think this particular thought, when I click on it, again, I'm not just doing a search on Alzheimer's disease on the web, okay? What I'm getting is the full context of this. And what this enables you to do, especially if you're sharing your brain with your teammates, with your colleagues, with your students, is you will discover things that you won't get in a search. You're just going to get a list. You won't be able to see that, yes, this is about brain health. Yes, this is part of my lesson plan that I'm going to teach the students. Alzheimer's is related to the neurotransmitter acetylcholine in the brain. So I actually have that as a parent. And now you can see we're getting into thought types as well. And that's under, neurotransmitters. And from there, if I want to look at the neurotransmitter dopamine, I can see that's more related to different classes of drugs. And this is actually getting into, different types of drugs for mental health as well, and brain health. So this is how things can be connected, and you can see how it all comes together. And you can see we've got disease, and disease can be connected up to condition. And below this, we've got all kinds of information. So I can go ahead and add new articles. I can drag and drop files. There's also some interesting connections that I have as a jump about human insulin products and how they relate to Alzheimer's, because there's a connection between diabetes and Alzheimer's, and you can see further research is required. So there's a little bit of a tag there, but that lets me able to jump into diabetes. And this particular area then takes me back up to my connections on disease and research. So if I want to browse from a different perspective, maybe I want to look at heart disease, or I want to look at osteoporosis, any of these things, I can do that by browsing through disease and conditions. I can come up and look at things from a human body, from a biological system perspective. Like, for instance, that diabetes is part of the, there's implications with the endocrine system. So I've got it linked to pancreas right there, but I can also go ahead and just make a connection right there to diabetes. And one of the great things about the brain is you'll notice as I start, once you have a somewhat of a populated brain, as I start typing, it's actually going to show me, and it's everything is indexed in this brain. So I can just come in and see, oh, okay, dairy and diabetes, that's very interesting. A diabetic meal plan, how that affects the, our hormones. Let me go ahead and connect that piece of research to this particular biological system. And this is how the insights and these sort of aha moments come together nicely in the brain. So that's just kind of one area in my teaching and learning brain here. And you notice I have pins at the top of these brains. Pins are areas that you can move to really quickly. So let's say I was doing a lot of information or a lot of studying on the endocrine system. I can go ahead and right click and just select to create a pin. And now this particular thought is at the top of my screen. I can always go to home, back to the top of my hierarchy, which is interconnected, but I've got some other areas, and I've actually pinned these because I kind of just thought these were cool areas to show you all in terms of building a visual knowledge base, especially in the academic area. So for instance, I can go to living things. Now this is under biology and life sciences. I could have got to it from science, right? So we're learning about science. I'm just going to go up and down so you can get a sense of the ability to traverse a larger knowledge base, and back into biology and life sciences and living things. Of course, you have the formal classification taxonomy of all living things, from animals all the way to species. So this is a static diagram. If I actually want to bring that to life, I can map out these types of classifications in my brain. And the other thing that you can utilize are thought tags and thought types. So here you can see that kingdom, the kingdom of the particular living thing is appearing in red. So I'm going to go into the kingdom animal, or basically Animalia, and from there I can go into the phylum of the living thing, and I'm going to go into phylum chordata, which basically means these particular living things have backbones, and of course there's other types of phylums that you can go from there, and then from there we actually go into the class of animals. So I'm going to go to good old mammals, where we fit in, and you can see how this area, I'm browsing through a formal classification, and then I can go into the order of animal, which is, of course, in this case, carnivore, which is very interesting, and then all the way to the family, okay? And so the nice thing about this, though, is this classification can be used to sort of structure a broader knowledge base.
Thank you, Shelley. I'm sharing my screen now.
Yeah, looks good.
And great, good. This is my Shakespeare brain. I mean, maybe a little bit of a Shakespeare nut. I enjoy reading Shakespeare. I certainly enjoy seeing Shakespeare. And this is a brain I keep of just my personal thoughts on Shakespeare and what I'm learning about Shakespeare. I feel like, I'll never know everything that there is to know about each of the Shakespearean plays and sonnets and so forth. So I keep track of them here in this brain. And let me take you on a quick tour first, and then I'll share with you how I specifically learn more about Shakespeare and discover information as time goes on, or new plays, not new plays because all of his plays are already existing, but a play that I haven't seen yet. When I check that out, how I add that information into my brain and learn a little bit more. So first and most importantly, in this particular brain, I've got the literature area, and I have them broken up into the obvious categories of comedy, history, poetry, sonnets, and tragedy. So I'll just click on comedy. And one of my favorites, Midsummer Night's Dream. It's a play that I'm currently reading. So let me give you a little bit of background of the types of things that I keep in this brain. First and foremost, the complete works of Shakespeare are in my Shakespeare brain. That's probably pretty obvious. On each individual thought, I have just a text file. And as you can see, I can scroll through over here in the content area. And this is the complete play of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And that exists for each of Shakespeare's known plays, his sonnets, his poetry, it's all there. Now, that's nothing new. The complete works of Shakespeare are out there in the world. They can be found online. I think Oxford University has the complete works of Shakespeare. So they are accessible. You can find them online. But what I mostly enjoy about this brain is that I can add my own thoughts and interpretation of the Shakespearean work. So if I click on notes, for example, you can see sometimes I just cut and paste some crib sheets or a cheat sheet off of Encyclopedia Britannica or something, but just to give myself a little history about this particular play. If I'm going to be seeing it soon, I sometimes don't want to read the whole play, but I just want to read the synopsis. And so that's what I keep here in the notes. I often will also put character studies down below. Like I said, I'm a little bit obsessed. So I can see all the different characters within the play. Aegeus is the father to Hermia, who loves Lysander. And notice if you're following along my my link labels, Lysander loves Helena, and Helena loves Demetrius, who loves Hermia. So that is sort of the lover's quandary within the play of, you know, this man loves this woman who loves a different man who loves a different woman. It's just a vicious circle. And that provides obviously the basis and the comedy to the play. So it's a lot of fun to visualize that and read a little bit of detailed information that I've kept about the characters as well. Now, this is something that I really, really like as well. I have divided sort of Shakespeare himself, the author. I've created a timeline and grouped together his writings just with doing my own research. Again, you can find where he was when he wrote a particular play, who he was writing for. And so I've broken his life down basically into these 5 different stages. And so there's the years where he hasn't written anything. And then we get into sort of beginning, taming through comedy of errors. So he started out obviously writing comedy, goes on, starts working for Lord Chamberlain, starts writing some heavier history plays and tragedies, all the way up to his final plays, which I put those into sort of his retirement, the final 3 plays that he ever wrote. And his last work, it's well known that his last work is The Tempest. And the play, The Tempest, if you've ever seen it, is really amazing because the main character in the play is actually at the very end of the play says goodbye, and in the play itself, he's leaving this bizarre world that they're all in for off to an unknown journey. And great, that's really interesting when you read it as a play, but when you realize that this is Shakespeare's last play, Prospero is him. It is Shakespeare bidding farewell not only to the audience but to life itself. And it really provides a deeper meaning of all the journeys that Prospero has gone on and the journeys he's sort of created in his head. And now he's bidding adieu. So that additional information, capturing that in the brain really provides just another layer of context for me when I'm either seeing the play or reading the play. That additional information, I find it to be very powerful. Also, you'll notice that I have jump thoughts from time to time. So my character studies below, I can always see where and when Shakespeare was writing a particular play. And off to the side, I have more recent adaptations of Shakespeare in film. So The Tempest, you might not know that The Tempest is basically the guidelines to The Forbidden Planet. If you're familiar with The Forbidden Planet, warning Will Robinson. They're off on this unknown galaxy, uncharted galaxy, exploring the world. It's really just a ripoff from The Tempest in a nutshell. And then, of course, we've got The Tempest, the play that came out, and Shakespeare in Love is sort of based on really revolving around the journey of the Tempest as well. So it's really nice to discover those. In fact, I've got another great one if I go really quick over to tragedy and pull up Hamlet. From time to time, I like surprising people with this information. Over on the left, I've got all the different actors that have played the Hamlet, but also if you notice, Hamlet and the Lion King, the storyline is exactly the same. A young prince, his uncle killed his own father and banished him from the kingdom, but then he came back to trick the uncle to take back the kingdom. It's the Lion King. So the Lion King is Hamlet, and a lot of people, my kids actually freaked out a little bit when I shared that information with them. So all of this information collected and stored together just once again provides further information on a subject matter that's really important to me. And I thought I'd share with you really quickly, staying in this particular brain, I'm actually going to jump into another area. Not only am I keeping track of literature, films, sort of the timeline of Shakespeare's life, I keep track of resources. It's not easy to sit down and read a Shakespearean play. Let's be honest. The wording and the patterns and just the verbose structure of the play can be daunting and a little bit difficult. I keep my own dictionary in the brain itself. So there's something I'm not understanding, I'm just going to click on a letter. I go to O. What does off cap means take off your cap? That makes good sense. Offices are service apartments in a large house. Those are the offices. So from time to time, I just need to look up, orgluous. Orgluous means proud. I would not know that otherwise. So I refer back to my dictionary here from time to time. I've got Roman numerals that I need to look at, phrasing, iambic pentameter, so better understanding of the structure of the Shakespearean language. But also I've got a new area in this brain, related authors. So I've read a lot of Shakespeare and I'm starting to find a little bit of interest in Thomas Dekker and specifically Thomas Middleton, who were writing in and around the same time of Shakespeare. And as I mentioned, I'm no expert. I'm a bit of a Shakespeare buff. I find it interesting, but I'm certainly not, deeply educated in the ways of Shakespeare in any way. So I'm starting to read Thomas Middleton, some of his books, or some of his plays rather. And lo and behold, I've got this page open now. Not too long ago, I stumbled upon a really interesting article that was comparing Thomas Middleton to Shakespeare and presenting the question, did they write together? Did they co-author a couple of their books? And this is really interesting. So in the article, they mention, if I scroll through the article here, I think they mention measure for measure. Let me just do a quick search for it. Yeah, there it is, measure for measure. And a couple of his other plays that he is well known for. I don't have my notes in front of me, but I found them in this particular article, and I thought it was really, really interesting. So I went back to my brain and you type in measure for measure. So we'll get to measure for measure. He wrote measure for measure when he was working for for the King's Men. That was sort of he had left recently, just before that, I think he was with Lord Chamberlain's group. Now the early 1600s, he's working for the King's Men, for King James, I think it is. And there's Measure for Measure. And elsewhere in this article, they mentioned specifically All's Well That Ends Well and Macbeth. They're picking up lines of Shakespeare that fall into both some of Thomas Middleton's books and some of Shakespeare's plays as well. So I'm absolutely fascinated by this information. Let me jump back to the Thomas Middleton thought. And so this is what I'm going to do. I saved this information knowing that today's webinar was coming up. I'm simply going to have my brain open, and this particular article open at the same time. And I'm simply going to drag and drop this article into, because I want to refer back to this at a later date and really take a closer look at it. So I simply drag and drop it into my brain. So I've got this web page.
And Matt, I'm glad you're covering drag and drop, because people are asking about dragging and dropping files. That's great. And Berthold actually had a question about if it's better to store it internally or keep it as a link. So as you're dragging and dropping these files, since we're on topic, maybe you can address that question.
Absolutely. So drag and drop of a web page, as you can see, is a really, really easy process. You simply open up in your favorite browser. As you can see, I like to use Google Chrome, and simply drag and drop from the address bar right into the brain. I'm going to grab another one. This article that I stumbled across really got my interest going, so I did a little bit more research. A little farther back in time, back in 2008, I found an article just on someone's blog about comparing lines of Shakespeare with Thomas Middleton. So once again, just another reference, and they specifically mentioned the two of them being familiar with, working for, or knowing King James, who was the King of England at the time. In some of King James's, I'm not sure if they're diaries or his notebooks, he mentioned knowing the two authors. So great, now we've got confirmation that King James knows both of these men. They probably know each other and potentially collaborated. So once again, notice I'll just simply drag and drop the URL from the address bar right into the brain. So drag and drop into the brain. When you're dragging and dropping something into the brain, you're simply adding a link back to that URL for a URL specifically. Now, Word documents, files, spreadsheets, those behave a little bit differently for drag and drop. The default setting for dragging and dropping a file into the brain is to create a copy of that file in your brain. Now, you can change that. There are keystrokes you can use to override that setting, so you can move the file into the brain, or you can just make a shortcut to that file in the brain. Now, which option do you want to use? That's a personal choice. It's totally up to you whether you want to have an internal attachment, a shortcut, or you just want to move that file from its original location directly into the brain. Whatever works best for your environment. And I always like to point out, you can click on options and open up your preferences. Now I'm on a Windows machine, so I click on options preferences. On a Mac, you would click on the brain preferences. And on the behavior tab, you can specify how you want drag and drop to behave. By default, it'll be copying files into the brain. I personally like to change the setting and I move files into the brain. Let me see if I can get to a file that I can drag and drop. There we go. So I've got just a JPEG. Let's try that one more time. There we go. I simply drag and drop right into the brain. And as you can see, it moved that file from its original location directly into the brain. So that's the setting that I prefer, just because I like to sync my brain to the brain cloud and then access all of this digital information from my phone, from a mobile device, from another computer. So it's really whatever works best for your environment. You can always go back and modify any type of attachment that you have to move it out of the brain, copy it out of the brain at a later date, whatever really works best for your environment. And Shelley, with that, did you want to take presenter back, or I
No,
noticed that
I
we have,
will, but
yeah,
there's a
great.
number of questions relating directly to Shakespeare. So we'll play
Oh,
we'll
great.
play brain ball. I will. I know a couple of you did want to see my COVID example, and we'll show that. But yeah, what I'll do, I just thought I'd hop on and chime in about the files. Yes, so the brain is that agnostic. You can have it link, like you don't have, like some applications want you to store their files in your applications. That's not us. We're basically a remote control for all your data. We have amazing examples of clients who are linking to like SharePoint and their intranet sites and their file drives because they can't contextualize them visually. So they overlay a really cool brain on top of that. So that's a great application. But to Matt's point, like storing the file internally, if you can, is great because then you can sync it across all your mobile devices. If you have, different computers, and then of course with your colleagues, especially now with all the remote work, and I was just going to pull up my iPhone, you can sync it to your phone and look at your brain on your phone as well. So the advantages, of course, of storing the brain, that document internally, is then it syncs securely across our cloud to any other machine, whether it's another user's machine or another machine you have, or another mobile device, and then you have that file. So that's, I guess, again, we can do that either way. But back to your Shakespeare brain, yes. Let's dive a little bit deeper, and then I'll take the ball back and show you a few more of my examples. Somebody was asking earlier, and I'm just going to go back into the questions about you had different icons and tags and different
Yes.
symbols that attach to your thoughts. So if you could kind of go into, I guess, dive into your tags, your thought types, and your icons on your thoughts. There were a few questions on that.
Absolutely. So notice when I've got a little script icon, I'm hovering over Much Ado About Nothing. It's quite obvious that Much Ado About Nothing is a play. And I know that because I've got my little scroll icon that appears there. However, if I were to click on another thought called Much Ado About Nothing, but if I mouse over it, you can see I've got a little film reel there, and that is the movie link, and it looks like they took that 1993 Much Ado off of Netflix there.
That
But
was Erica's
regardless,
question, Matt, actually, and she said that the Shakespeare brain, one looked like a tag, another looked like a yellow Post-it note, etc.
yes,
So she was
yes,
interested in that little Post-it note symbol you had too.
there is, and that simply
Okay, yeah.
means when there's a Post-it note there, that simply means that there is a note attached. So I keep notes for plays that I've written or plays that I've seen. I like to have, I mentioned earlier, my little cheat sheet, my crib sheet of the synopsis of that particular play. So Much Ado About Nothing, I'm very familiar with this play. I've seen it many times, I've read it before, and I've got my little cheat sheet as well as the actual full play itself. But let's look at all of the comedies over on the right or other plays written while he worked for Lord Chamberlain. One of them is Love, Labour's Lost. Now, I actually have read Love, Labour's Lost before. Oh, I do have a note for that particular one. Some of them I may or may not. Let's see if I can find one. Well, if I don't have a note, and there it's just simply updating. So the note updates here. Let's go to history. I've got no note on history, so that makes sense. The note icon only appears as an identifier that there is a note associated with that thought. So it's just a nice little visual. I know I've got a note there. On sonnets, you can see I have a note. On poetry, you can see I do not have a note. And all the note is on sonnets is that simply a note for me that there were 154 Shakespearean sonnets. Now the sonnets are all in notes, so you can see every individual thought has a note icon associated with it. So you could turn that on and off in your brain preferences if you want the notes identifier to be associated with the thought.
Yeah, and you may not want that because in some, like I love notes in my brain. I pretty much have a note to every thought. So if that gets redundant, I think the default is for that. I don't know if it's to be on or off.
The
We
default,
can go into preferences and show
yeah.
you.
Yeah, sure. I can click on
Yeah,
options
so if you
and
have
go
lots of
into
notes, because our
preferences.
notes feature, oh my goodness, is so powerful. with all the formatting and the different ways of doing the notes. A lot of our users are just using the brain as a visual note-taking software beyond the visual interface. But anyway, so you may or may not, if you just have a ton of notes, you might want to just turn that off and clean your interface.
Yeah,
Or
if you
I
know
do
that
like
every
seeing it Matt's brain because he's got a few different notes that have and have. So again, these are all things that you can adjust based on your preferences, your team's preferences as well. Very customizable in terms of like the look and feel and what you're showing people in terms of your semantic network.
And then also
and
down
Matt,
below
I guess,
on some of these, yeah, go ahead. I was going to just share
no,
that
you
some
finished
of
because I was
them
going to
also
ask
have
another question on your
tags.
Shakespeare. Yeah,
As you can
that's right. We
see,
have to get into
Midsummer
the
Night's Dream is,
tags.
yeah, one of my favorites. I have it marked down as playing soon. The play actually got canceled, sadly. So I can right click and remove that tag. And tags are simply attributes for thoughts. You can use tags. Once again, it's a very personal choice when to use a tag, what type of tags you'd like to have. But you can have multiple tags on a single thought. I always think of them as attributes for a particular thought. So you can see Midsummer Night's Dream. I was actually, back in my college days, I was in Midsummer Night's Dream. So I've got in it, and it's one of my favorites. So I've got it marked as a fave there on Midsummer Night's Dream. So just some fun things that you can do with tags just to add greater context to the information that you're navigating through.
And then the nice thing about the tag is you want to use it in a sense where there is a attribute that exists in many of your data sets, but you may not want a visual connection. So the nice thing about a tag is you can click on that tag in your tags area, and Matt can show you this, and it'll immediately aggregate any thought in your brain that has that attribute. In fact, I use this a lot when we're hiring people. We have tags for programmer, HTML programmer, full stack programmer, whatever. You just click on that little tag and boom, all your experts in that area appear. And I know a lot of companies that use those tags as well when they're putting together teams. Like, I need somebody who has experience with, a particular procedure that they want to do. Maybe you're putting together a team, and just click on that tag, and all that information comes together really nicely. So there's a lot of ways to slice and dice the information to get to what you want to see.
And here you can see I've got a simple tag. It's simply called a favorite, but my favorites are more than just favorite plays. Yes, there's Hamlet and Midsummer Night's Dream. I've also got one of his sonnets, and this one I really love, Thy Gifts, Thy Tables. And the reason why I like it is because it's a direct,
that's great.
Yeah, it's a
nice.
it's a direct reflection on the brain. Thy gifts, thy tables are within my brain, full charactered with lasting memory. So that means everything that I know is in my brain, and I can always rely on that to understand everything I need. So regardless, that's one of my favorite sonnets, but also under my favorites are board games that I played with my kids, and of course, who can resist the Shakespeare action figure. So
Cool.
A lot of different fun things that I mark as being my favorite. And you can think of that in terms of, in a business environment, I create tags for urgent items that need action right away, tags for things that need to be completed today, this week, this month, and so forth. So a lot of things that you can do with those tags to really benefit the structure of your brain and have more understanding on that data.
And Jose was actually asking, and he already figured it out apparently, how to set his tabs to dark mode, because some users are noticing that your brain is in dark mode. Just for you guys, you might notice that Matt's I guess the user interface, the menus are all black rather than our standard, I guess the Windows standard or the Mac standard gray. That's just a little feature as well. So there it is.
Yes, dark mode and light mode. You can turn that on and off with the brain. A lot of customizations that you can do to really make. You probably notice also that my wallpaper is, I've got a very clean, simple, clear background. Shelley's had some sort of inspiring, the staircase that's based on, the current book she's writing or reading. So you can really play around with a lot of the customizations within the brain to best fit the subject matter of the brain you're creating or your own personality. And a lot of that is done in the brain preferences. You can make settings, like we said, to the structure of the brain, how quickly the thoughts animate and so forth. And then there's another area, if I go into options and brain theme, where I can change the colors of all of the links and the gates and the thoughts and the text, choose a different theme, or even set up my own wallpaper and background, and even edit the note style as well. So highly customizable to fit your personality.
All right, great. Now, Lou has a very interesting question. I'll take the ball back, and that'll be a quick segue
Sure.
into my COVID brain, but then I'm gonna pass the ball back to you for more Q&A, but I'll let you read Q&A while I show this. But I'm gonna preference this with reading Lou's question. He says, does the brain have the power to do more than make simple, concrete connections? I'm interested in having it help me having it help me perform context mapping, content mapping, cluster analysis, outcome mapping, and idea networking. Can we do that? We can, Lou. Here we go. So I'm just going to show this because, we've been focusing a little bit more. And Matt, can you see my screen? Okay, I'm just going to minimize.
Yes.
And guys, I apologize. I'm on a very experimental build of the software. So, if that's why I had a few little glitches there. Don't, that's not going to happen on our current build. But anyway, I'm going into my COVID-19 brain to talk a little bit more about cluster analysis, data management, and working with large networks. And then I'll pass the ball back to Matt. Now, first of all, this is a team brain. This is a brain that was built with multiple people. So I'm just going to go into my online menu and click on brain access and sharing just to show you guys. This is available online, by the way, big banner on our homepage. You can look at it as a reader. I've given the general public reader aspect. I'm an administrator of this brain, and so is Matt. And then we've got some great team members, Jared, Jane, Jay, Brigitte, and so forth, who contributed. And I'm just going to close that. And I can actually look at who's done what. For instance, it looks like Brigitte is in there about whether the coronavirus is really a Chinese bioweapon, which is like so cool. This brain was put together, obviously when the pandemic started, and there was so much information coming at us, and we wanted to really formulate a perspective and learn how to triangulate, as individuals in different high-risk zones, as a company, and as a team. So, we talked a lot about Shakespeare and writer's brain, but like this is the kind of stuff as well, where we've got government organizations, we've got, pharmaceutical companies, medical companies, they're digging into things really deep. So I'm just turning it back to Lou's question on idea networking and sort of mapping out more complex information. So in terms of this brain, you can get into more specific idea networks. So for instance, I'm going to go into vaccine, this area here on treatments and vaccines, and this is at the top of this brain on our pandemic response. And in this brain, we just decided to sort of craft different areas that make sense. Now, in terms of clustering data and organizing it in different clusters, we're actually doing this by thought tags, thought types, and then we actually do it by region as well, because as we know, unfortunate, or I don't know if it's fortunate or not, but COVID-19 is regional, right? So what's going on in the United States is going to be very different from, what's going on in Canada. So now you can you can do data clustering and analysis by your tags, by your thoughts, or by your connections. So in this particular example, for instance, I'm going to go back to the United States. And I can go into different states and see what's going on, what's going on in California, and we've got different news. But one of the advantages of the brain is this piece of information can live in many different areas. So this is under another section that I'm developing, calling Living with the New Normal in COVID-19. And this California flattened the curve, and the curve went back up. So this particular thought, we've changed this area here, hotspots. You know, Alberta actually isn't a hotspot anymore, so I can actually delete areas. I can add California still was on and then was off. And people are coming in and making these connections in real time. But if I want to go back to any particular area and see what's going on, you know, I can go ahead and do that and even dive in. And you can see there's tags for different areas. Now, in terms of thought types, I'm going to go into treatments and vaccines here. And you can see that each one of these are drugs. So we've got the little drug icon. And then we've actually got also things called just treatments, various treatments we can do. And then we have companies as well as medical supplies and clinical trials. So if I want to click on a particular company and see what's going on with that particular company, I can do that. And then, of course, I could actually go into my thought types and tags and look at things this way. So if I actually want to pull up, for instance, just in terms of data aggregation, all my trial vaccines, everything that's in trial, I actually have a thought type for that, and boom, here they are. These are all vaccinations, thank goodness, that are all, you know, they're all plugging through, and we can track these things. And actually some of these we tracked quite early on, and it was quite interesting to see, you know, how they've evolved. So I'm going to click on the mRNA 1273 vaccine. And just so you can see how the information and that rich context is going to surround that. So here, this particular vaccine is put out by Moderna and the National Institutes of Health in the United States, and is classified as a trial vaccine, of course. And then we've got data. So I'm just going to close my questions box. I don't know if you can see that. And I'm going to turn this brain so you can kind of get a sense of viewing rather complex content as well. So if I want to start looking at this information, and this is a PDF, for instance, I could actually browse the information on, you know, one half of my screen or whatever, but see it in the context of maybe what this particular type of vaccine does, what the evaluation of this was, and then maybe another Word document on that, and then I can make a connection to maybe something, if this is going to be part of the new normal, which is another section in my brain. I can just go ahead and start typing in that and adding that. I'm going to go ahead and make a connection there to the new normal in my brain. And then I've made that connection right there. And so now I've got that piece of information right at the top. You know, that might implicate, you know, our education. So maybe I want to move that under what's going on with education. So obviously education is going to change when that vaccine comes out. But this is just another example to show you, you know, how far you can go with sort of the breadth and the depth, and you can organize your information by category, you know, which this brain does, obviously, you know, by different connections. And you're going to get to that data in many different ways. You can also look at the data from a thought type and tag perspective. So I have a tag here on hotspots. You actually don't want to be tagged with this in this particular brain, obviously, but you know, you can see there are actually more hotspots, and this has changed. But you can now see, you know, if I want to, you know, check out what's going on in Los Angeles, I can do that, and that takes me to a whole other area on safe protests, voting, and democracy, which is another area that I'm personally interested in, and I'm researching in this area, in sort of living with the new normal in COVID-19. So that's, I want to get back to Q&A because I'm just looking at our time. We've got kind of 5 minutes before we're on the hour, but I did want to get, you know, kind of address larger data maps, larger information sets. This example is online. You know, we've got everything from pharmaceutical companies to educational institutions. Like you can see, you know, what University of Oxford is up to. They're actually doing that other vaccine trial, of course. That's in phase 3 now. It says it was in phase 1, and this is where I can actually change and make new connections here. So I've got this particular, this should actually be linked now to phase 3 because this has changed. So we can go ahead and change things, and I can unlink it too. So I can go ahead and unlink So you can kind of see how I'm changing things in real time too, because this is not a static brain. So now all phase 3 clinical trials, from different vaccines to different drugs, different news sets, I can come in here and look at what's going on. And the good news too is a lot of these things that we're anticipating starting when we started this brain in, I guess it was March, actually are now in phase 3, and hopefully will be coming out safely to the public. So that's a little bit more on that particular brain. I don't know if there are any questions on this brain particular. I think I've addressed most of them, Matt. If not, I'll pass presenter back to you so we can go more into other stuff on the Q&A. Sorry, Matt, I think you're on mute. I don't know if I can hear you. Oh, there we are.
Thank you.
Gotta love that mute.
Yes. I didn't want you to hear me typing away. I was trying to get to as many questions as I could. There's a lot of questions out there. We might not be able to obviously get to all of them today. So again, feel free to, if we haven't mentioned it already, write into support@thebrain.com. If we don't get to your question, a lot of questions about more advanced features such as importing into the brain. Which, yes, we do have many import capabilities, but unfortunately, that's a little bit more of an advanced feature that we probably won't get to today. One question was, wow, you have all of the sonnets, and yes, I do have each individual Shakespearean sonnet, all 154 of them, each one on a note, on a thought, so I can click on any one of these. And yes, I did enter these manually. This was not an import. As I mentioned, I'm a bit of a Shakespeare nut, so it's kind of fun to, now I can say I've read and typed up every individual Shakespearean sonnet. I don't know them by heart, but I did get the chance to read them, so that was kind of fun. That being said, there are some import, if you've got a properly formatted folder structure that you want to import into a brain to populate it very, very quickly, those options certainly are available. And then the other question that I saw, and then Shelley, I'll hand it over to you to see if there's anything else you want me to address.
Sure, yeah.
Yes, we are recording today. And yes, several of the brains that we're demoing today are available for you to either view online or to download. My Shakespeare brain, you're more than welcome to download a copy, and the link will be included in a thank you email that you received for joining us today. So if it interests you, you can download your own copy of my Shakespeare brain. Yes, it's my own notes in this particular brain. If you don't agree with the review that I have or some information that I have, feel free to edit, change it, and make it your own. Not a problem at all. But several of the brains that we're sharing, Shelley's specifically the teaching and learning brain, many people asked about, that is available for download as well. Everyone will receive those links as well as a link to a recording of today's webinar.
Yeah, and we didn't even get time to show you our U.S. president's thought, which it's a kind of cool example but you can get that online too. It has the presidents classified by chronologically, whether they're Democrat, Republican, or Federalist. So that's also a nice information classification example. But we have a few more questions, so we'll go a little bit longer. So in terms of some of the questions, one person earlier asked about the one brain versus everything. And in terms of that, we've been showing more content-specific brains. It's also easier to share a content-specific brain with a general audience like yourself and make it available for download. But these brains can all be imported together and merged. You can merge brains, you can separate brains, you can copy thoughts from one brain to another. So Matt, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about sort of brain management, merging, separating, copying real
Absolutely.
Quick.
Yeah, as Shelley mentioned, there's more than one option. You can have smaller topic-specific brains. You can have one brain with all of your information. If you're interested in my Shakespeare brain and Shelley's learning brain, and you want to import them into your existing brain about everything that you care about, yes, you can do that. But as Shelley mentioned also, it's just easier to share. I can share my Shakespeare brain without fear of sharing my financial records that I keep inside my brain or my phone numbers for family and friends that is in another more personal brain that I maintain. So I like smaller topic specific brains if at one point and another, and I know some people are experimenting with this because some questions came up about control clicking. On a Mac, this would be a command click to copy thoughts from one brain to another. So if I just want to copy the literature, notice I can either control click on a thought or on a gate, and anything I control click on, I'm adding it to my selection box. If I don't want poetry, I'll control click to move it out of the selection box. That was the specific question that came in earlier. And I can even control and draw sort of a frame around a grouping of thoughts. So great, I've added all of these to my selection box. What do I want to do with them? I can right click, copy these 22 thoughts and paste them into a new brain. So maybe I'm teaching a class and it's all about Shakespearean comedy. So therefore I don't need everything else in this brain. I can copy these, create my new Shakespearean comedy brain and paste them right into that brain. And it copies everything, the notes, the file attachments, the icon, the color codes that you have on all of your thoughts and links. All of that is copied when you copy those thoughts and paste it into another brain. To save time, I'm going to copy this as a text outline. Say I'm turning in a report type, and I need sort of the basic structure of my brain to fit just onto a piece of paper, onto a document that I'm turning in for my boss or for, looks like, I don't know, Notepad is opening there, so I'm going to try this one. So I'm just going to open up, and you can open up Word, any type of plain text editor. So I'm just going to open up, it's called Notepad++. There it is. Sorry, it opened on another monitor. So here I've got a blank page. I right click and paste. So I copied the outline. And there you can see it retained all of its structure. So literature, comedy, every sort of generation is indented and pasted in. So many different options as far as importing into the brain, exporting data, or copying groups of thoughts from one brain to another. And again, we do teach a class or have a class from time to time. Recently, it was on August 20th, 2020. So we called it The Brain 220. And we went through all those advanced features that I'm demoing now, really taking our time over the course of an hour to show you how to merge two brains together, how to segment brains apart, and going through all those more advanced features of the brain. So look for that tutorial on our website if you want to dive in depth on merging or segmenting brains.
And so Thomas is asking, so can you copy that outline into a brain? So yes, Thomas. So he just hits copy and he goes to the other brain and then paste thoughts. You can even do that for a new brain. It's not a bad feature to, I guess, demo real quick if you have the time. If not, because then, like for instance, if you want to grab some thoughts off our download the brain zip of my writer's brain and maybe grab just the copy and just paste my section on Joseph Campbell, you may not want all the other stuff. Go for it. Have them. Use them to your advantage. So, and Torgrim is saying no cloning, just copy with the brain, right? Yes, that's just copying.
Many different options, absolutely. Right. So I can paste just the outline into this brain for individual thoughts, or I can, let's see if I still, if I have these copied, I can right click. If I copy the thoughts, not the outline, the thoughts, jump over into my other brain, which whenever you create a new brain, by the way, it's going to randomly select one of your different themes and wallpapers. And so that's why you see the background there. It's one of my different themes I've created. And I'm going to paste these 19 thoughts. And you'll see in just a moment, it's going to paste those thoughts in, and I'll have access to all of just those individual 19 thoughts in this particular brain. So it just takes a moment because, like I said, it copies everything, and it's 19 thoughts. There it is. So under comedy, under literature are all of my thoughts. Now the color code that worked so well in that other brain, as you can see here, is a little too, it's not showing up very well. So I can go in and tweak this if I'd like, or just change the wallpaper color in the back of the particular brain. But those 19 thoughts are all there.
Yeah, and that's great. They look good, and yeah, you can tweak it and change the color. And Doug actually mentioned a little bit earlier when I did the linking and unlinking from the phase of the drug trial that he wasn't seeing the pop-ups. He couldn't follow the linking from phase 1 to the linking of phase 3. So maybe real quick, linking and unlinking is kind of an important feature. So if you just want to unlink and link something so that people can see how to do that, that's our replay. And thank you, Doug, for calling us out if you miss something, because we certainly want to make sure you know how to do that.
Sure, I'm going to go back to that Thomas Middleton thought. So just type in mid, Thomas Middleton, there he is. Now remember, I'm now very suspicious of Thomas Middleton. I think he helped write Measure for Measure. So I want to link Thomas Middleton to my existing Measure for Measure thought. So I'm just going to simply click and drag on as if I'm creating a new child thought underneath Thomas Middleton. And I just type in a few letters, M, E, and notice as I'm typing, this little box appears down below. These are the brain's existing thoughts. And this is my existing thought list. So I can link to an already created thought. And this is such a wonderful, advantageous feature of the brain application as your brain database grows and evolves over time. Your digital brain never forgets. My organic brain, I can't say the same for it, but regardless, I'll be typing in the name of some new idea that I have, a new place where I plan on going camping with my family, a new thought that I have in one of the brains I'm creating. My digital brain reminds me, hey, you've already got that. So measure for measure, I already have it. I don't want two measure for measure thoughts. I'm just going to double click and link to that existing measure for measure. And now you can see measure for measure falls under comedy, Shakespearean comedy. It falls under the King's Men, and it's now falling under Thomas Middleton. So there's different ways to navigate to the play Measure for Measure in the future. And you talked about linking and unlinking. So there I've made a link between two very distant thoughts in this brain. Measure for Measure way over underneath comedy. Thomas Middleton under a different branch of related authors to Shakespeare in my research branch or area of the brain. Now that I've done a little bit more research, I don't think that Thomas Middleton had anything to do with Measure for Measure. So that's my own personal opinion. I can simply right click on a link between two thoughts and select to unlink. So very easy to link to an existing thought or unlink to move thoughts around through the brain. I sometimes use that feature as well. And I'm necessarily one more question that I'll get to. Someone asked specifically about context-sensitive naming. Context-sensitive naming is a way of like adding the existing thought name to the new thought name that you're about to create. So there's Measure for Measure, which is Shakespeare's version. Let's say a new version of Measure for Measure comes to light, is found in the basement or rubble of a building in London somewhere when they dig up the Globe Theatre, and they find Thomas Middleton's version of Measure for Measure. So it's different from the Measure for Measure that I have. I'm going to create a new thought called comma, Measure for Measure. And that comma, what it's going to do is it's going to append the parent name onto the front of the new thought that I've just created. So you can add the comma at the beginning or at the end, wherever it is, the brain will add that parent name to the thought name. You can also type it in manually afterwards. If I already had Measure for Measure here, I could add Thomas Middleton, comma, at the beginning manually. And the advantage there is when it appears under Thomas Middleton, it appears as Measure for Measure. But when I go to look at the full thought name, this is Thomas Middleton's version of Measure for Measure. So now I've got clearly two Measure for Measure thoughts when I'm doing a search, but I'll know specifically which one is Shakespeare's and which one is Thomas Middleton's. So that's a little bit of the context-sensitive naming feature that exists within the brain as well.
All right, great. And somebody also asked just a couple more questions. We are going into overtime, so we're going to end the session. And for those of you new users, I know Erica, you mentioned you were a new user and a couple others, do join us this Friday for the Brain 101. And for those of you that I apologize if we missed some of your questions, those are smaller class sizes. So we'll absolutely be able to answer every single question and demo it. And of course, we have free support for you. You can chat on our website or write into email support or set up a web meeting with one of our support staff. But I do want to mention the 101. But I have a couple more questions. One was earlier on about the ordering of your child thoughts, that you did them alphabetically, but there's other options like ordering by thought type, putting numbers on them so they can be chronologically. So if you want to show how to display children by different preferences, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. So I'll just stay here under the Thomas Middleton area. As you can see, it's pretty much alphabetical, but it's ignoring the word the, a, and what are those, conjunctions? Not conjunctions, but it'll basically just ignore those. So you're seeing game is coming first. Measure for measure, the full thought name is Thomas Middleton, measure for measure. Let's take that out of the equation. I'm just going to right click and forget this particular thought. So there we can see game of chess, bloody banquet, phoenix, the Spanish fly, widow, the witch. So pretty much alphabetical order of those thoughts. But let's say for whatever reason, I know the widow is the first Thomas Middleton, and I don't know this for sure. I'm just guessing at this point. My apologies to Thomas Middleton experts out there. But let's say this is his first work of art, of literature, The Widow, and I want to make this thought appear first in this grouping of child thoughts. I'm going to alt click. Alt clicking on thought is a way you can change the thought name. We've talked a little bit about thought labels that I can add. This is a great area where I can go to add stock icons. I answered a couple of questions in the chat about stock icons or uploading or capturing an image, a zoomable icon for this particular thought. My goal right now is to make this thought appear first. I like the hidden ordering system, personal preference. If you add a dot, and now I could just say dot one, I have a little system of my own. I go in groups of 5, 10, 15, 20, so that I can weave in other thoughts at a later date. So I'm just going to say dot 10. I'll go by tens just to make it really easy. So, or I could say dot 1, but regardless, notice it moves widow up to the very first slot in this grouping. If the next play that I want listed in this grouping is the Spanish Gypsy, I'm going to control click. And so, oops, I did a control click, my apologies. It's a different feature, alt click, and that opens up the thought properties display, dot 20. And again, the only reason why I'm going by tens is so I can squeeze something in between the widow and Spanish Gypsy if I want to. So let's put the bloody banquet there one more time. I alt click. I like to, and all the dot does is hide the number. So it has a nice clean display within the structure of the brain, but I don't see 1, the widow, 2, Spanish Gypsy, 3, game of chess, and so forth. So just a way of keeping things clean. And now because I skipped 10, I can weave something in. Dot 15 goes in between. Oops, let's take the space out right there. And
I don't know if you have the EdTech brain too. In the U.S. President's section, they display by thought type and numbers, but we might be at a time.
Yeah, I think I might have to download that one. So
okay, no problem.
Okay.
I think we're on our final question, I guess, since we're on the hour. And this is more, I don't know that we'll get to demoing this, but Julie, it was kind of an interesting question. What if you want to link Thomas N to COVID-19 for some reason? You know, inter-brain linking. Yes, we can do. It's so can maybe end.
Sure. Maybe one of his plays, an undiscovered play about COVID-19. I don't mean to make fun, but you never know. From time to time, yes, you need to link two brains to one another. So if for any reason I want to jump from an area of the COVID-19 brain into my my Shakespeare brain, I'm going to right click and select the option to copy local thought URL. So copy local thought URL on Thomas Middleton. Now I've done it on my clipboard. I'm gonna close this brain and I am going to jump into my COVID brain. And I'll come back and remove this later. Oops, went to the wrong brain. I'll come back and remove this later. Let's say we're going to, I've got an area of this brain, silver lining. So silver lining is just trying to find, hidden bits of inspiration or positive news in this. Yeah,
I do
happiness
like that
in this
section. It's a great section.
So maybe we want to have some fun and read some Thomas Middleton. So this is where I'm going to put this particular link. I right click and paste web link is the option that shows up. There it is, Thomas Middleton. And what does this do? It follows the same rule as all attachments and all thoughts in your brain. Clicking on the attachment will open that attachment in its native application. So this is a thought in a brain that runs in the brain. So clicking on that attachment is going to launch the appropriate brain and take me to the appropriate thought. So there I go right to the Thomas Middleton thought in my Shakespeare brain. So it's very easy to link from one brain to another brain that you are developing.
All right, great. And I think with that, we're going to end today's session. A lot of questions, but we are into overtime, so we can absolutely encourage you all to join Matt, who will be hosting 101 this Friday, and we'll be actually posting more additional webinars for next month. So sign up for our newsletter or follow us on Twitter for our next event that will be forthcoming. And we do offer support to all users. So meanwhile, feel free to chat with us on our website or email us at support@thebrain.com. And so I hope you can see, just going back to our original title of visual inquiry, the art of visual increasing understanding with connections, how much more powerful a network of your notes, your files, and your thoughts come together to provide that greater understanding, as opposed to just a search list or a folder full of documents. So hopefully you'll be able to kind of maybe apply some of these techniques in your own brain to enrich your own understanding on whatever it is you're trying to solve in your life or your business. And with that, I think we're going to end today's session. Matt, any other final words of wisdom or tips for our users before we close out today's session?
Just want to thank everyone for joining me today. You will receive a recording of today's webinar. We went through a wide variety of different features and capabilities and subject matters within the brain. So if you want to watch today's webinar at your own pace, you will be receiving that link in an email, most likely tomorrow or early Friday.
Very good. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. We look forward to seeing you on future brain technology events. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.